Welcome to Uninterrupted, the podcast from Forbes Cybersecurity, where we dive into the world of technology, cybersecurity, and IT solutions. We help your business stay protected and ahead of the curve by providing the information you need to stay safe. Whether you're a business owner, IT professional, or just tech curious, this is your go-to source for staying informed and staying secure.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Uninterrupted. I'm your host, Chris Hammonds, and with me today is our COO, Jon Fausz. Jon, say hello.
Hey, everybody.
All right, guys, we're going to hop right into a very important topic today. We're going to talk about the cloud. So there are so many misconceptions about the cloud, but let's start with this. Jon, what is it? What is the cloud?
So it's somebody else's server. Let's start there. It's really what it is a marketing term that somebody made up to sell access to somebody else's server. And so what people figured out a while ago was that you didn't have the resources to run a correct server, you maybe didn't have the space considerations, you didn't have the power, the cooling, the redundancy, you name it. There's lots of reasons maybe you want to be in the cloud. And so I have these resources, I have this data center, so how can I monetize that to recoup some of my cost? And so they offer cloud services to people. But that's really what it is it's a server you don't control.
Wow. Now one of the things I hear, it drives me nuts, but there's this overwhelming confidence that because people moved everything to the cloud, that they are just more secure for some reason. Now, is that a fact, myth? Is there any fact or any truth behind that, I should say?
There can be. And so there was definitely truth to that, generally speaking, in the past, where having access to some of the enterprise detection, response, recovery tools, some of the cybersecurity tools that the big companies would use were only limited to your big cloud providers because they just had the resources to get them. But now that companies like ours exist, where the cybersecurity tools are coming down to the small, medium business level, and we can get them out in that manner, no, the cloud is not necessarily more secure. There's certain aspects of it that can be. There's certain aspects of it that may not be. It really depends on what your use case is, what you're trying to do with it, what type of data you're putting at it. But at the very minimum, if you don't need to have access and you don't need to, if you don't need to have everybody that be publicly accessible to the internet and have everybody to have access, you controlling the gateway to how that cloud or how that server works would mean that the cloud is maybe not the most secure way to do it, because everybody on the world potentially has access to that resource versus it being at your office or being in a private location that you can control every aspect of the authentication and access to that device. So gotcha. Some cases it may be, some cases it may not be. It depends on your use case. So you're going to hear that a lot from us. I know it's going to be really annoying. The cloud really comes down to what is your unique situation. And I think a lot of people, a lot of companies, and a lot of information that you're going to find out about the cloud is going to be 100%. Yeah, you don't want to manage anything. You put it in the cloud, do all those sorts of things. And we say, stop. Let's figure out what the best use case for you is. What's the best security? What's the best access? What's the best mix of all these consideration, pricing included, capital expenditure, operating expenditure, all those things. We're going to go into that way in more detail in a future episode. But when you really deal with the cloud, you want to figure out what's the right cocktail for you, not just, hey, this is the new thing that everybody told you to do.
Absolutely. And how do we figure that out, right? Well, let's start here. What are attackers usually going after when they attack cloud-based environments like Microsoft 365, G Suite? What are they going after?
Well, we talk about the three bad things all the time, and I bring that up because it's a very good way to kind of get the mindset of what a hacker wants and then also what businesses are trying to protect. So when we talk about direct access to the financials or putting themselves in the middle of a financial transaction, we talk about getting access to sensitive data and blackmailing you for that access, or we talk about shutting down your operations and where you consider paying a ransom might be a good way to get your operations back up and running. Those are what we talk about with the three bad things. Well, when we look at the cloud, the reason you moved to the cloud was so you would have a lot of very high availability access to your data. It's about your data or the line of business applications you need, the control over that, all those things. You're giving up control so that you can then say, hey, I want to maximize the availability and the access to that. Well, the hackers know that as well. So if they can get in the middle of your operations of these cloud systems and lock you out of them, then that's great. If your data is sitting up with a cloud provider and they can use a stolen credential or a credential theft or stealing the session token and authorize as one of your users and gain access to the system that way and steal your data, then that's great. They can use that for a myriad of things. We'll often see just getting access to somebody's email and putting themselves in the middle of a financial transaction. The famous example that we have here is the almost $400,000 wire transfer that happened because somebody put themselves in the middle of that wire transfer request. But it's really situations that way. So they're looking at it, the hackers are looking at it from a methodology of how can I further expand my hack to get access to more things that I shouldn't have. And then they're looking at, can I steal this data and blackmail it for you, blackmail you for it? Can I put myself in the middle of a financial transaction, steal the money directly that way? Or can I lock out your access to this data to make it so that your life is hard? And if they can make your life hard, then you're more willing to pay. And conversely, the reason that you moved to the cloud was for the easy access of that data and the ability to have high availability. The hackers know that if they can get in the middle of those systems and limit your ability to access that data, then it really puts a constriction, like a boa constrictor, on you that's tightening, and making it so you can't get out. And you're like, okay, well, I'll pay some money to make this situation go away.
Gotcha. Now, what is another question I get is what is kind of the shared responsibility aspect when it comes to cloud security?
Yeah. So this is the thing that we really see a lot of people struggle with. The shared responsibility idea of whose job is it to protect the data. We see a very, very big misunderstanding with this. And if you look at Microsoft's terms of service, but I imagine if you look at all your cloud providers' terms of service, what they say is generally this. They are going to protect their systems, their back-end systems, or other customers that are on their cloud systems from getting access to your data. So what that means is they're going to try to protect their back-end systems from being hacked so that somebody can get access to your data that way. But what is your responsibility is your front-end access to the systems. So your computer that accesses the data, you need to keep that clean. You need to make sure it has cybersecurity on it so that you know the computer accessing that system is clean. Conversely, if you're allowing a BYOD, bring your own device scenario, how do you know that the system that's accessing the data is clean, right? You need to make sure that your passwords are good and that you have multi-factor authentication and you have all the things that are looking for, I don't have a keylogger on my system or all that kind of stuff to say, my ability to access this system is good. If everybody's a global admin of Office 365, if one of their accounts gets taken over, then they have access to everybody's email. So limiting the number of global admins you have, making sure that people's daily driver accounts aren't the administrator of these cloud services, if that's ever possible. In some cases, it's not. So it's really, it goes from there. But they're going to say, your cloud provider is going to say that we're going to protect our back end from our side. But everything from the front end access of this thing is your responsibility.
Gotcha. Now let me ask you this then. Why are cloud account takeovers so hard for businesses to detect?
Right. So the hackers have gotten really good at hiding from end user behavior. So when they take over somebody's email account or somebody's access to files or things like that, they hide their behavior that they're doing from the end user. So they're saying, I'm going to send out an email as you, I'm going to delete the sent email that comes out, and I'm going to take every reply that comes back to this, I'm going to bounce it into a folder that they maybe don't see. So the hackers have very good playbooks, they have very good processes, procedures for hiding the data that they're doing from the end users. But what they're not able to do as effectively is hide from the logs. The logs will say that they've logged in from someplace where they shouldn't. The logs will show weird behavior going on, weird file access going on that's not normal end user behavior. And if you're looking at that correctly, you can then have your security operations center take a look and say, hey, is this normal user behavior? Is it not? Does it pass a certain threshold that we're going to lock down the account and start asking some questions and just limit everybody's access to it from there? And so it's really hard to hide from the log files. It's really easy to hide from the end user behavior. But we see a lot of times some companies will have something on their cybersecurity where they don't have really anything for their cloud cybersecurity. And you really need to have all the pieces work together for a comprehensive cybersecurity plan, no matter where your data sits. You need to protect it where it lies, no matter where that place is.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean, and you kind of touched on this already too. I hear a lot of people say they don't want an on-premise server because they want everything in the cloud. And every business is different, like you kind of touched on. It really depends on your needs. How would someone, if they're trying to make that decision, what would be some of the first things that you looked at or that would help you make that decision?
Well, so I'm going to say right now, reach out to somebody who's going to give you an honest answer and not necessarily the answer that works best for the company that you're talking to. So what makes us the most money at Forbes is if you move something to our private cloud. It's just the cloud is more expensive, it is. once you amortize out the cloud costs, because you're paying for the uptime, you're paying for the availability, you're paying for the power, the backup, all those sorts of things. And so a lot of times the best answer for an ease of management perspective from your IT company is put it in the cloud because it's less things that they have to do. But we look at it from an aspect of what's best for you as a company. What is the right thing for you from an access perspective, a security perspective, an uptime perspective? Do you have space for a server? Do you have the bandwidth to be able to handle a remote server? Are all your people working in the office, or are all of them remote? There's a huge chunk of questions that we can help delve through. So if you talk with a company like ours, we're going to give you an honest answer and say, we're going to look and see what's best for you and then go from there. But security, when we're talking about a security aspect, if I have criticality access to my data and that cloud provider goes down, and it's happened before, the unthinkables happen and large providers go down, how does your company keep working if they don't have the access to the data that they need? And I understand reasons for maybe wanting to move things to the cloud, but that is the thing that you need to think about is, if this system goes down, how does my company continue to make money on a platform that is 100% outside of my control? I don't have access to the backups. I don't have access to the backend systems. I can't just restore this server back up into a place where I can work off it again. So that is a consideration that needs to be weighed in of when you move to a cloud provider or you move something to a public or a private cloud or those sorts of aspects. What are you giving up with the ability to respond and recover from an incident?
Gotcha. Now, let me ask you this. What might be one early warning sign that business leaders tend to ignore in a cloud environment?
Oh, man, that's a good question. Unusual behavior. So we see this a lot go on where the end users aren't trained properly of how to identify unusual behavior happening in their network. End users are your biggest risk factor because we need to allow risk to the system for them to do their jobs. They need to be able to click on things and do things for able to do their job. What happens if a system doesn't do what you expect it to do? IT guys have trained their people to just try it again if it doesn't work. Well, sometimes they'll click on something and it won't work, but it'll do exactly what the hacker wanted it to do. That email attachment that you go to open that doesn't open. It might have tried to install some software on the back end. It might have stolen your Office 365 credential. We see this a lot of the times happening, that link that you clicked on that seemed innocuous, that just didn't do what you expected. It might be a cybersecurity red flag. And so that's some of the stuff that you really want to teach your people on, not just how to not click those things. We're at a point now where we're well past it's enough to teach them not to click stuff. The hackers have figured that out. They've figured out how to make it look like legitimate requests. Their phishing emails are way better. AI has caused them not to have spelling mistakes. The grammar is perfect. They'll take over email accounts that you already have access to, and they'll put fishy links in them. I mean, I've seen a case where old user account didn't get deactivated from somebody's Google Workspace environment. Office 365 could be the same way, but the Google Workspace environment, the company found out that the unauthorized access had happened by, if you're working in Google Sheets, you can see when other people are working in it, their little cursor moves around for their block that they're working on. And they were inside of a Google Sheets document that had passwords in it, looking around, and they saw somebody who hasn't been in the company for 6 months using that Google Sheet, but they didn't kill the account, right? And so there's all sorts of things that you want to look for. You want to make sure you're doing, like we said in the past, the non-sexy things of cybersecurity, and that's disabling old user accounts that shouldn't exist anymore. Or if they do need to exist, well, then limiting the scope of what they're supposed to do just to only the thing that you need to keep that account for, so that it can't be used against you.
Gotcha. And we're going to talk more about the cloud in a longer episode as well. But one last question about it before we go, John. The biggest misconception that you think there is about the cloud, what do you think that is?
I think secure by default is a huge one. And I can tell you security by default is a goal of companies like mine. We push the cloud providers to kind of do that. It's now become a very big talking point for the cloud providers, but they're more concerned about accessibility than they are necessarily security. And so whenever I get access to Office 365 from the back end, the first thing I'm doing is hardening it. There's all kinds of things that we do on an Office 365 environment for a client that we pick up that the end users never see. It doesn't impact them at all, but it makes the hackers' lives more difficult. Well, why aren't those on already, right? Why is it you don't have access to this thing that 99% of your company doesn't need, And then when you do need access to it, then you turn that on. Why is it the other way, right? And so that's really one of the big misconceptions that we have. We put it in the cloud and it's secure. Maybe,
Right.
maybe have you actually done the groundwork to check that out and actually secure it down? Also, when you move stuff to a cloud provider, I'm dealing with this more and more, and we look at the compliance things. Vetting out your cloud providers is a huge part of now all the modern cybersecurity compliance programs. How do you effectively do that? There's some trust that needs to be in place with, when I talk to a business leader about, is the cloud secure? Is this thing secure? What are you wanting to do with it? Well, if you don't hold it and you can't look at the logs and you can't see the things that are going on with it, then you don't know. So you have to trust them to a certain point and say they're secure. And so a lot of that will have to do what happens, how's their incident response? What happens when they do have an issue? How's their communication happen? Because people will have an issue. Like cybersecurity is not 100% perfect. Bad guys will get through, and then what happens then? And so that often becomes a thing, and there's a lot to unpack with it, but you really need to do your due diligence as much as possible. But when you move to a cloud provider, no matter who that cloud provider is, you are trusting them to a certain extent with your data and that they're going to protect it. And you don't 100% know. The only way that you can know is if you do it yourself. And so that's where this consideration comes from, and that's when we talk to people. It makes sense sometimes to put stuff in the cloud. It makes sense sometimes to not. But being honest, being open, have the lines of communication and say, hey, these are the actual pros and cons of each, and then making an informed decision from there is more important than just saying, hey, this is secure by default, or it's just more secure because it's there. It might not be.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of great information. And you cleared up a lot of things for me, too, that I was kind of curious about with the cloud, too. So ask yourselves, are you staying in the cloud, or are you thinking maybe about putting a server on premise? We're going to help you make that decision. Tune into our next video. So stay tuned with us, and we hope to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Uninterrupted, a podcast from Forbes Cybersecurity. We hope you walked away with practical insights to protect your business and stay ahead of the latest cyber threats. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. For more tips, resources, and cybersecurity updates, visit Forbes.com, that's 4bis.com, and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. We'll be back soon with another episode, so stay vigilant and stay uninterrupted.